Hello everyone, and welcome to a new series we are doing, part of my Penn State coverage for Pennsylvania football news. It is the day before game day. Every Friday around noon, give or take about an hour, I'm going to put out a video similar to this one, 5 to 7 minutes, maybe a little bit longer depending on the matchup, talking about Penn State's next opponent. This video will be a little bit longer, closer to the 10-minute side, because we're going to get into the overarching season preview. If you want a shorter, more concise, kind of more fast-paced, hard-hitting, you can check out my Instagram, at Mason Eddinger, MASONEDDINGER, for a quick 3-minute video. But here, we're going to get in for about 10 to 12 minutes about Penn State's season, and more specifically, when they take on Nevada tomorrow at 3:30 Eastern Time on CBS. Follow at MasonPFN, MASON_PFN, for all the live coverage. But let's get into it. And I think the big story for Penn State is expectations. And we've heard James Franklin and Media Day and players, they're trying to silence it, trying to keep it what's in between the halls at Penn State, keep it to a point where they're not getting their heads big. They're not getting the ego of a team that the media and the personalities are giving them. They're trying to keep it very level-headed, calm, that this is unlike any other. This is just like any season. It's anything but. This is unlike any season for Penn State, at least in my lifetime. I know there's been a lot of times in Penn State history with Joe Paterno and whomever else where they've had high expectations. But in the new modern era, there has not been a bigger season for Penn State entering a season than this one coming up right here in just a couple of days and tomorrow against Nevada. The big thing is, I challenge you to find 2 to 3 more personalities, people, coaches, athletic directors, whomever it may be, related to college sports that are under more pressure than Penn State head coach James Franklin. I have one off the top of my head. That's Brian Kelly, because he has really underperformed with LSU, given the weapons he's had. Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. He's had a plethora of talent. LSU has not seen the college football playoff since their 2019 national championship run. Brian Kelly has not been able to put out a defense in that season where they had Jaden Daniels. But Penn State and James Franklin, he is probably the second most scrutinized or high-pressure person in college football. Not Drew Aller, not any other quarterback in the country, although Arch Manning's going to have a lot to say about that. But James Franklin, he really turned the tide on Penn State and the fans' reputation. And if you know anything about coaching, you got to get the fans. Results will come, but if you can get the fans on your side, it'll be a lot easier. He's had a couple of run-ins with fans last year. Last year was a very wild year for Franklin, talking to fans, getting in, kind of buying into the noise that happened after that Ohio State game. I remember I was there on the whiteout when they introduced player and coach introductions. James Franklin got booed. I'd never heard that to the extent of what I heard against Washington. But the Penn State fans, they're kind of satisfied. You kind of fed their bellies. They're full now. You took them to the semifinal. They're starting to get hungry again, and they're hearing the expectations. They're hearing that they could have a top 5 quarterback in the draft, or excuse me, a top 5 pick in the draft, and Drew Aller say, I'm going to come back. You had a chance at a top running back in the draft, Nick Singleton, say, I'm going to come back. You have a top 10 running back in Katron Allen, probably in the country, say, I'm going to come back, I'm going to be a backup. You got guys like Denai Dennis Sutton and other people on this team that say, I'm going to come back. I could have gone to the draft and been a second, third, in some cases first-round pick, but I'm going to come back. And that kind of created a sense of this is the biggest season in Penn State history. And I agree with that. On an overarching landscape, I'll give my season prediction coming up here shortly, then we'll get into the game against Nevada. Penn State, on a national scale, has never received this much hype. First off, from the media, a lot of people I'm seeing, a lot of big-time personalities are picking Penn State to go to the national championship. Colin Cowherd, whatever you may think about him, he's got Penn State and Texas in the national title. A lot of guys have Penn State as their either number 1 team in their own rankings, although Texas is number 1, or Penn State going to the national title, winning or losing. Penn State is one of the most hyped-up teams by the media, and then also for the big guns, the big wigs at Vegas. Penn State is right up there with Ohio State, right up there with Texas, these big dogs that, I'm not saying Penn State's not, but Penn State is up there with the expectations of a Ryan Day at Ohio State, a Texas with Steve Sarkisian, a Kirby Smart in Georgia, Dabo with Sweeney in Clemson. James Franklin has to match those expectations. And overall, throughout James Franklin's career, he hasn't been able to do that. When he's gone up against Ryan Day, he has not been able to win against Ryan Day yet in his college career. But this year feels different. This year feels different for the Nittany Lions. As far as the season prediction goes, I think they go easily win their first 3 games, right? It's not a real hard non-conference schedule. They're playing Nevada, and then they're playing FIU, and then they're playing Villanova. So they should be, I know they're about a 6-touchdown favorite against Nevada. They should be at least 5-touchdown favorites in all 3 of those games. And then the season starts with that opener against Oregon in a whiteout. It's going to be one of the greatest atmospheres Penn State's ever seen because they haven't had a big, meaningful whiteout at night in a long time. So that's going to be a really fun game to look forward to. Season prediction for the Nittany Lions, it's not aggressive. It's not conservative. It's just about what most people are predicting. I think it's an 11-1 season for Penn State. And I'm not going to go game by game and predict their season, but I will say that I think the one loss comes at either Ohio State or home against Oregon. And again, that's I'm not rewriting or discovering the Rosetta Stone here. It's not some cutting-edge analyzing going on, but I do think they will lose to either Oregon and Ohio State. I think it's about a 70% chance they lose to Ohio State and then a 30% chance to lose to Oregon. If you say, okay, they're going to lose to one of these teams, I put a higher percentage because you have to go to Columbus. Who's guarding Jeremiah Smith? That's going to be tough to do. Ryan Day's had Franklin's number. As far as percentages in terms of how the season goes, I think there's about a 30% chance they go 10-2 or worse. That would be losing to Ohio State and Oregon, and then dropping one at Kinnick Stadium and against Iowa. Or maybe Indiana's really good again. Or maybe Nebraska has a resurgence. Or Nico Iamaleava at UCLA gets going, and they drop one of those games. They go 9-3 or 8-4. I think that's about a 30% chance. I think there's about a 40% chance they go 11-1, which I have it as the highest percentage chance here, and that's the prediction I just gave you guys, with a loss to Oregon or a loss to Ohio State. And then I think there's about a 30% chance they go undefeated. The Nittany Lions run the table. They beat at Ohio. They get a win at Ohio State, which would be James Franklin's biggest regular season win of his career, and maybe the biggest win of his career because you look at the playoff last year. He beat SMU and Boise State, and nobody's really contending to say that those teams are real contenders. In fact, I'm watching it right now, and Boise State is trailing 27 to South Florida. Okay, and I don't know what SMU's going to do. They have a good quarterback in Kevin Jennings, but the big thing for Penn State is the expectations. We talked about that. Now let's get into this Nevada game. And I think this is one of the more important games of Penn State's season, not in terms of what's at stake, but what Penn State can gain. James Franklin has talked immensely about the depth of his team. He's excited about the depth of his team, but he understands that there could be some cause for concern. There's a good chance we see backup quarterback Ethan Grunkmeyer in this game if Drew Aller handles his business. It's a good chance we'll see some of the backup running backs, the freshmen, the sophomores that have come in and made a good impression early on in spring and fall ball. And then defensively, on the defensive line, they'll rotate through a plethora of players, especially, again, like I said, in that secondary and in the middle linebacker positions. And harping back onto the season predictions, if there is a reason it goes wrong, I think the reason is, if we're looking back on this, and I'm making a video in December, and Penn State finishes 8-4, what went wrong? I think the biggest thing that would go wrong is not Drew Aller underperforming, it's not the offensive line, it's not anything. It would be the questionable safety play, the questionable corner, not safety, but overall secondary play, and linebacker play. They have, I think, a top 5 quarterback in the country. They have the best running back duo in the country. The receiving core is one of the better in the Big Ten. I'm not going to say better in the country. The offensive line is one of the better in the country. The tight end room is, with Khalil Dinkins and Luke Reynolds, is one of the better in the country. The defensive line room is one of the best in the country. Linebacker and secondary is where they struggle. I still think they're pretty good and sound, but I think you get to a point where you're playing against Jeremiah Smith, or you're playing against Dante Moore, who's looked good in the games he started prior to Oregon. There could be some question marks there. As far as the Nevada game goes, I think Penn State is going to try to pass the ball early. I expect a lot of passes early because they want to see about these 3 new receivers coming in, right? They want to see about these receivers and getting game reps. That's big. Drew Aller, I talked to him. I said, is this the biggest offseason of your career? Very cliche response. He says every offseason is the biggest of his career. But I truly believe this is the biggest offseason of Drew Aller's career, considering he's got 3 new targets. And he had to really start from scratch on a lot of these guys that he just met a couple of months ago. So they want to be able to pass the football early. I expect the game to get out of hand. I think Penn State's a 44.5-point favorite. So the game's going to get out of hand. It's going to get to a point in the second and third quarter where they're just running the football. So expect them to pass early to get the game reps. You could be synced up in fall ball, in spring ball, in the blue and white game. You could be synced up and perfect in that. Nothing replicates game reps. So I think Penn State, although they're not going to take the opponent lightly, because we've seen in previous years, just last year they almost lost to Bowling Green. A couple of years ago in their season opener, they almost lost to Appalachian State. They're, of course, going to take these games with all the seriousness in the world, but they're almost going to treat them like a preseason game, getting ready for that big matchup against Oregon, and it's getting those 3 receivers into the game system and into what it's like to play for Penn State in a real live setting, situational football. What do we do in a 2nd and 3 with these receivers? What do we do if we get into a 3rd and long, stuff like that. Defensively, I think they're going to shut Nevada down. Nevada is a team that could be sneaky in the Mountain West. I don't expect them to be. They're one of the teams that is not a contender. I would say Boise State's a contender, but as I mentioned, I'm looking right now, they're down 27 to South Florida. So the Mountain West is wide open. Penn State should have no problem here. I think the big thing for Penn State is you can't let your opponent have hope in the first half. There should not be a moment, and Penn State had a really good year last year. But the problems for the Nittany Lions is, first off, when they played Maryland on senior day in the last game of the season, Maryland led 7-0 after the first 15 seconds. Now, granted, Penn State won in a blowout, sure, but they gave Maryland hope. They were able to put them away because Maryland was not that great of a team. They gave Bowling Green hope in their first meeting in the first couple of weeks of the season, where they only won the game by 7 points. So they should not, and hopefully will not, give Nevada hope. As far as the score prediction goes, I think I'm going to go 52-10. Penn State leads. I think it's probably 42-0 at half. Nevada gets in it a little bit. 52-10, so that would be Nevada covering the spread at 44.5, which is a ginormous spread, but I think it overall will be a nice test to see for Penn State. And the unknowns of this team, can they go out there with the 3 new receivers and just kind of see what they will produce this year? It's that time. College football is back. Can't wait. We'll be live from Beaver Stadium. Kickoffs at 3:30 on CBS. We'll have a similar video to this on the sidelines at Beaver Stadium. We'll have all the live tweet updates, like I mentioned, at Mason_PFN on Twitter. Follow me on Instagram for all the interviews, players, coaches, all that good stuff. Folks, one more sleep, as they would say. Penn State, Nevada, tomorrow. We'll be there. Have a good night, folks.